Okay. We're going to look at a few general rules first before we go into specific details of stress patterns in English. They're fairly simple to understand. And in terms of applicability, you can say that about 80 to 85% of the words that you see in English, the old and the current ones, right? They do behave based on these rules. Okay. Of course, there are exceptions. Of course, there are cases where these rules may not apply. But as far as your exam is concerned, we do not usually ask words or phrases that do not follow the usual stress patterns. Okay. But just for your knowledge, you must know that when you go through these rules and you try to apply it to the words in English, there could be few words, about 10 to 15% of these words, who do not behave or they do not follow the general stress patterns that we see in the English language. It could be for a variety of reasons. Could be because some of the words are derived words. They come from different origins. Some of them could be loan words from a different language, so they don't really follow the pattern. Some of them could be a recently coined word, so it could be the case that it is not fitting the existing rules, right? So all of this could contribute to the reasons or factors that why certain words do not follow the words, while it is applicable to about 80-85% of the words. Okay, so this is just a disclaimer before we start. But the rules that we generally have, the rules that are devised and that we have with us, they are very scientifically driven, and they we see that their applicability is much higher than non-applicability. Okay. So first, with the monosyllabic words. So monosyllabic words basically are words with just one syllable, right? In such cases, there is no much confusion, right? We discussed about this in the last class, but maybe I'll just revise it for you. So when we talk about word stress, especially in the case of word stress, right? So there are other forms of stress also, like there is sentential stress also, right? But we are not concerned with that. We're only going to be looking at word stress. When you talk about stress in a word, understand that stress is the property of a syllable, right? It is not the property of a sound. It is not the property of the whole of the word, but stress is mostly the property of a syllable. Now, what does that mean? That if a word has, say, more than one syllable, right? If it has more than one syllable, then the stress of the word has to fall on one of the syllables involved in that word, right? Now, there are certain rules to see how these stress is applicable or how it is applied. But one needs to keep in mind that whenever you have a word which is more than one syllable, it definitely, one of the syllable definitely takes the stress on it, right? That is the whole idea behind this. Now, what does stress mean? Stress simply means that one of the syllable in the word is going to be pronounced or articulated with more force, louder and lengthier, right? The articulation of that particular syllable is going to be lengthier, and it is also going to be a bit louder than the other syllable. This is what stress simply means. Okay. So stress is also then an acoustic property. It is not about the grammatical rules or not about any other technicality. It is about how someone speaks, right? To be precise, how someone whose first language is English would deliver that word, would articulate that word. So it's more of an acoustic property or more of a physical property of the sound articulated, right? So that's the basic on stress, about what stress actually is. Okay. Monosyllabic words, there are two theories on this, right? Some people would say they don't take any stress. Okay, since there's only one syllable, there's no point of talking about stress. But some would say, no, there is a stress on this on these kind of words as well. As long as there is a vowel sound in a syllable, it definitely takes a stress, right? So there are two kinds of articulation on this. Whatever there's a debate over this, but whichever side we take, we just need to understand that in case of monosyllabic words, stress, in case if it exists, is always on the vowel sound of the syllable present in that word. Okay, so that's what this says. Monosyllabic words are stressed on the vowel sound in the word. Okay, this doesn't create much confusion. But as we move on, we'll have more cases, like for example, in the case of disyllabic, trisyllabic, polysyllabic words, we certainly have to follow certain rules in order to get there. But before I do that, just give me a minute. Since I am the one handling this today, I need to see if anyone else has joined. Okay, all right. So we discuss about that as we get to the disyllabic and trisyllabic stress. But in general rules, the next thing that one needs to keep in mind is about the stress or the unstressed vowel sound schwa, right? When we were discussing sounds in English, one of the very first sessions in Learndero, we discussed about this, right? What did we say? That schwa is a monophthong or a pure vowel in English, which does not carry stress. It is the only unstressed sound or the vowel sound in the English language, right? So whenever there is a presence of a schwa in a syllable, now it's a vowel, so it definitely has the property of forming a syllable. It can form syllables. But as in when you spot a schwa in a syllable, you automatically know that that particular syllable is not going to take the stress. Okay, so for example, I have a word like T. However, in the actual articulation, the last ER is the schwa sound. So it's teacher. If you're trying to mark stress in the word teacher, right? How many syllables do we have in teacher? How many syllables? Two, right? Two. So obviously, when you have more than one syllable, this is a matter of confusion for us that which one of this is going to take the stress. But in case you have schwa in one of the syllable, then you have gotten lucky, because definitely that particular syllable will not take the stress. So in teacher, then what is the syllable that is stressed? Which one do you think is stressed in teacher? The first one, right? You have T and you have ch. So in the second part, because you have the schwa, right? Unstressed sound schwa, that syllable is definitely not going to take any stress. So automatically the stress then goes to the first syllable, which is T, right? This other way of looking at it, like you can say that teacher is a noun. So I'm going to mark it on the first one. If that is how you're going to do it, even then it is right. But if you look at it from an acoustic point of view, the actual reason is this. It's not that it's a noun, so you mark it. The real reason would be that this is going to take the stress. The first one's going to take the stress since the second syllable has a schwa in it and it is not able to take the stress, right? It can't be stressed. It's an unstressed vowel sound, right? The rules that we say, like noun is stressed here and then adjective is stressed on the second and all that, these are basically for people who do not have in-depth knowledge about phonology and phonetics, okay? So if in the case of a word like teacher, why is it stressed in the first one is actually because of the reason behind it is that the second syllable has a schwa, okay? Okay, so in that case, the only point I'm trying to make here is that whenever you find a syllable after the syllabification, whenever you see that a syllable carries the schwa sound in it, you can avoid it. You may not consider it for the stress marking, right? This is helpful, especially in the case of disyllabic words, because if one of it has a schwa, then definitely the other one gets the stress. You don't have to bother too much about where the stress could be marked now. Okay, understood this point?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so like the second point mentions, you can have the schwa appearing in the word initial position or the word mid position or the word final position, right? It may appear anywhere, like like all your other vowel sounds. They can also appear in the beginning, in the middle, or at the end of the word, right? No matter where they appear, when they are part of a syllable, that syllable is going to be unstressed. Okay, that's the takeaway point here. So a few examples here, like, the words brother, brotherhood, right? Simpler. All of this carries the ER part in most of the words, basically is the schwa. The actual vowel sound that represents the ER suffix and ER combination words in the word, the cluster words in the word is basically the schwa sound. Okay, that's all. Just for your information, so that becomes easy for you. Okay, then moving on, we have the next set of rules. This is about the prefix and the suffix, right? So keep in mind that when you find a word which has a prefix and is also a noun, it's most likely the case that the prefix may be stressed. Okay, this is exclusively with respect to words with prefix and suffixes, right? Suffix, we know we have a set of rules and we'll look at them shortly. But in the case of prefixes, they rarely get stressed. But when they are found in words that are nouns, okay, they sometimes, most often, they get the stress. But if the word that we are talking about is an adjective or a verb, then usually the prefixes are not stressed. Okay, and the reason being very simple. All the nouns, all the words that are nouns, they usually get stressed on the first syllable, right? Whereas if it is adjective or a verb, then the stress is on the second syllable. So following that rule too, it makes sense that if prefixes appear in a noun, then most probably they get a stress. Okay, and most often on themselves because they appear in the beginning. But if they appear in adjective and verbs, adjectives and verbs, then they do not get a stress, right? Uh, so this is one part. Now on the screen, you will see something about un, in, pre, ex and all, and I've crossed it out, okay? So don't bother with that rule. This was initially present, but then when I tried working out that rule with a few words, I felt like it is not really fitting. So ignore the part in the slide which has been marked with a cross. You just need to understand the first part, that prefixes, when used in verbs and adjectives, are usually unstressed, but in nouns, they are stressed, and most often the stress is on themselves as they appear in the beginning, right? Okay. Any questions at this point? Because we're moving to disyllabic words. All good?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Okay.
Yes.
So now disyllabic words, we just discussed about them, right? So you have a disyllabic noun. Where is it going to be stressed? On the first syllable, right? Nouns usually are always stressed on their first syllable, okay, until and otherwise specified. Most often, the usual case, almost all the time, the case is that nouns get a stress on their very first syllable. Whereas adjectives and verbs, they are going to take the stress on second syllable. Adverbs also behave similar to nouns in the meaning that they also get stressed on their first syllable most often, unless of course they are derived words. Say for example, it was an adjective in its origin, but then you derive the adverb from an adjective, and if originally in the word, the adjective word, if the stress was on a different syllable, then the adverb also follows the same thing. I mean, there is no change in the stress pattern after it becomes an adverb. But if it is an individual word on its own, individual adverb on its own, it's not derived from any other adjective or anything, then usually the stress is on the first syllable. Okay. The same thing is applicable to noun also. If you, after you change nouns into adjectives, there are significant shift in the stress pattern, right? That is what happens when you add suffixes and all, ikil and iti and all. You can add suffixes and change them from one class to other. So if the noun is changing to an adjective or a verb like that, then the stress pattern changes accordingly, right? Same is applicable to adverbs also. If you're changing them, if they are derived from an adjective, then it retains the stress on the adjective. It doesn't change it. Just because it has become an adverb, it does not change the stress to the first syllable. Okay. Whichever ones is the stronger category among the given two, they are the ones which play the role in the stress pattern, right? That's the Yes. So yes. So getting back to the disyllabic word, your nouns, adverbs, they're mostly going to take the stress on the first syllable, whereas adjectives and verbs are going to take it on the second syllable in a disyllabic word. Now, what else do you see here? In the case of nouns, look at the second one. Nouns may be stressed on the last syllable if there is a long vowel sound or a diphthong in it. Okay, so for example, you have a word which is a noun but has a long vowel at the end of the word. Like for example, the word trainee, right? This is a noun, but the ending of this word has a sound that is a long vowel, right? Has E, right? Career, in the word career, at the end, you're going to have a diphthong. So in both these cases, the stress is going to be on the last syllable. That is basically saying on the diphthong or the long vowel. Okay, get this point? You guys know that the stress in a syllable is basically on the vowel sound in that syllable, right? When you say stress syllable, you're basically saying that the vowel sound in that particular syllable is stressed, right? That's what we mean. So in the case of